In today's video, we are going to learn what SSH is and how we can use it to get a reverse connection over the internet. Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Sat from CyberSudo. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and follow us on social media for more content. Now keep in mind that I have previously made a video about port forwarding and how you can enable it on your router to get a reverse connection over the internet. You will find its link in the description of this video. Now, what is SSH? SSH is a network protocol that is used to connect and communicate securely with a remote machine that has SSH enabled on it. SSH is a replacement for a protocol called Telnet, which is also a network protocol that's used to connect to a remote machine. Very similar to SSH. But the problem with Telnet is that it sends the data unencrypted, which are in plain text, unlike SSH that uses an encryption when transferring all the data. Now let's talk about SSH tunneling. Basically, SSH tunneling is a method of creating an encrypted SSH connection between a client and the server machine through which services ports can be relayed. Now you might be asking, why would we use SSH tunneling? Well, the first reason that actually happens with me is that the router that comes from the ISP company does not allow me to enable port forwarding. So in this case, I have to go to the ISP company and ask them to upgrade my router, which will increase from my monthly bill. Or I can use SSH tunneling, which I think is much better and cheaper than upgrading your router and paying monthly bills every month. The second reason is to circumvent the firewall security protocols to access a service that's only available on the remote machine internal network. For example, let's say that you are at work and you want to access a streaming service to watch a TV series or a movie. And this streaming service could be Netflix, for example. But because you are at work, there is a web filter that's installed in the network that blocks you from accessing Netflix.com, for example. So what you can do in this case is to use SSH tunneling by forwarding the SSH connection to a computer or device that you own that's running SSH service. Another reason why SSH tunneling is used is to hide your identity. For example, what we are going to do in this video is to create a payload and set the L host or the IP address that the payload is going to receive connection on as our VPS IP address. So it's not going to be our IP address like port forwarding, and instead it's going to be the public IP address of our VPS server. So when someone clicks on our payload, for example, you'll receive a connection on your VPS server, and then this connection is going to be forwarded through SSH tunneling to your attacker machine. Now, with that being said, let's jump to the computer to understand more about the types of SSH tunneling and which one serves you the most.
There are three types of SSH tunneling. The first type is called local port forwarding, which forwards a connection from the client host to the SSH server and then to the destination host port. So let's say that you are at work and you want to connect to your PC at home using RDP. But the problem is that port 3389, which is the default port of RDP, is blocked by the company firewall. The solution for this issue is to use local port forwarding, in which you forward the blocked port number, which is 3389, to a different port number that is not blocked by the company firewall like SSH. So right now you are at work, you are using this computer, the work computer that has this IP address. And this is the computer at home that you want to connect to, that has SSH enabled on it and RDP enabled on it. And it's in a completely different network, as you can see from the IP. And you want to connect to your machine at home using RDP, but the port 3389 is blocked by the firewall. So what we do is we create an SSH tunnel on port 2020, which is the default port of SSH, between our work computer and home computer. And since port 2020 is not blocked by the firewall, we can connect to our remote host using SSH. And what the computer is doing is that it's taking the data that's sent to the port that we created, for example port 8080, and forward it through our SSH tunnel, bypassing the firewall, and then when it gets to our computer at home, it uses the port 3389 to connect to our remote desktop application or RDP, finishing the connection. Here is the SSH command that we are going to use local port forwarding. So we start with SSH and then we say -L, which is local port forwarding, and then we specify the port number that we want to create on our machine, and then the IP address of the machine that we want to connect to, which is our computer at home, and then the port number that the RDP service is running on. And lastly, we specify the username and IP address of the remote host. The second type of SSH tunneling is remote port forwarding, which forwards a port from the server host to the client host and then to the destination host port. And this is basically the opposite of local port forwarding. And this is the type of port forwarding we are going to use in this video. So here we have the hacker that has SSH client, and here we have the VPS that has SSH enabled on it. And what the hacker does here is that he creates an SSH tunneling on port 2020, but instead of using local port forwarding, he's going to use remote port forwarding. And then the hacker will create a payload or backdoor that uses the VPS IP address and a certain port number, let's say 4444. So the moment someone clicks on our backdoor, the backdoor will try to connect to the VPS server we possess on port 4444. And then this connection is going to be forwarded to the attacker or to the hacker that is listening on port 8080. So the command is going to be as follows. It starts with SSH as usual and then -R to specify that it's a remote port forwarding. And then we want to specify the port we are going to use to listen for the incoming connection. And you can see here that port 4444 is going to be forwarded to the local host, which is the attacker or the hacker machine that's listening on port 8080. And then we specify the credentials like the username of the VPS and the IP address of the VPS. So what's happening here is that the moment someone clicks on our backdoor and we receive a connection on port 4444, this connection is going to be forwarded using SSH tunneling on our local host, which is the hacker machine, on port 8080. So the hacker should listen on port 8080 instead of port 4444. Now you can use any port you want. Port 8080 is not mandatory. The last type of SSH tunneling is by using dynamic port forwarding. And dynamic port forwarding is when creating a SOCKS proxy server that allows communication across a range of ports. This is useful when you are at school, for example, and want to access Netflix, but there is a web filter installed on port 80 which blocks you from accessing the website. So what you do is you create a SOCKS proxy on a custom port in which your browser will send all the traffic to the custom port you created. Therefore, access all websites blocked by the web filter. Now the first thing we are going to do is to create a VPS server, and we can do this by using a website called DigitalOcean. It's not a free option, so when we scroll down here you can see that you can create a droplet or virtual machine for $5 a month. I haven't found any free VPS servers, but if you know any, please let me know so that I can put its link in the description. So once you create an account on DigitalOcean and verified your account, you're going to log in, and as you can see, this is the droplet that I have created with the IP address. In case you want to create a droplet, you just want to go to create and then droplets. And from here you are going to specify the distribution. You can leave everything to Ubuntu and then the basic plan, $5 a month, and the location of the data center. And then you scroll down and specify the root password that is going to be used to log into our VPS server. So you can put the username or the password that you want to specify for this username, which is root. And then scroll down and create your droplet. After that, you have to wait 1 to 2 minutes until your VPS server is ready. Once it's ready, you want to use an SSH client to connect to your VPS server. So it's going to be PuTTY for Windows. This is the most popular SSH client. and you can use SSH for Linux. So in Windows, let's say that we want to connect to our droplet. All we have to do is to download PuTTY from the internet from its official website, and then put the IP address we have got, which is this one, put it in here, and then say open. Now it's asking us to enter the username, which is going to be root in our case, and then the password. And as you can see, we have logged in successfully. Now I'm going to show you how we can use port forwarding or remote and local SSH tunneling on Windows first, and then we can move to Linux and see how we can create a payload with the IP address of our VPS, and then see how we will receive a connection using SSH tunneling. So I'm going to exit first and open PuTTY again. Let me delete all the sessions. So the first thing I'm going to do is to go to SSH from here, and then go to tunnels. And from here, we are going to specify the source port, which is the port that we are going to connect to in order to access a certain service on a certain port. So let's say that it's going to be port 1234, for example. And then we will see the destination, which is going to be the IP address of our VPS, followed by the port number we want to connect to. Now, of course, if you want to access RDP, you are going to put the IP address of your home machine, followed by the port number of RDP. So let's say that we are going to copy the IP address of our VPS. So let's say that this is our home computer and we want to connect to RDP. So we put its IP address, then colon, and then followed by the port number, which is 3389, which is the default port of RDP. So I'm going to say add, and now it's added. And now I'm going to go to sessions and connect to the remote host on port 2020. So this is a basic SSH connection. So I'm going to say root, add, and then the IP number. Now it's asking for the password. I'm going to enter the password, and now we are connected. So when we go to the top bar here and then right click and then event logs, and then we scroll down, you can see that there is a local port forwarding. So there is a local port 1234. This is the number we have, or the port we have created, forwarding the connection to this IP address on this port. Now, of course, this port is not enabled on our VPS server, and that's why it's failed. The port number of RDP for Windows and not for Linux, and that's why it's failed. Now I'm going to exit from PuTTY and then open PuTTY again. And you can see by going to SSH and then tunnels, you can specify whether you want the connection to be local or remote or dynamic. And this is up to you. Or you can use, if you want to use IPv4 or v6, but I'm going to leave it to auto. Now on the right side, we have the attacker machine, which is Kali, and on the left side, we have the Windows machine, which is the victim machine. And both devices are connected to a completely different network. So when we type ifconfig eth0, you can see that this is our IP address. And when we go to Windows and type ipconfig, you can see that this is its IP address. So when we try to ping, for example, this IP address using Windows, as you can see, we are not getting a response. And when we go to our Kali machine and try to ping the Windows machine, as you can see, we are not getting any response. So both devices are connected to completely different networks. Now, the second thing we are going to do is to enable port forwarding on our VPS server. So the first thing we do is we connect to our SSH remote host by typing the command SSH followed by the username and then the IP address. And after connecting to our remote host or remote SSH server, we are going to edit a file called sshd-config. So we are going to do this by typing nano, which is the text editor, and then the file location, which is located in etc ssh, and then sshd-config. Then hit enter. So we are going to scroll down, all the way down, and you will see this option disabled. And what you are going to do is to delete the comment here, and you will see the yes instead of yes. You are going to see no. So you have to delete the no and add the yes. And then you have to add an extra rule, which is going to be called gateway ports, and it's going to be specified to yes. So this is very important. The gateway ports has to be yes, and allow TCP forwarding has also to be yes. Now I'm going to save the file by clicking or holding the Control key and then O, and then hit enter, and then Control X. Now I'm going to exit from my SSH client, and now let me maximize the window here. Now the next step is to create a payload that once the target or victim downloads and executes this payload, we will receive a connection on our VPS, and then the connection has to be forwarded to our Kali machine. So we are going to create a payload using MSF Venom. So I'm going to type MSF Venom, and then I'm going to specify the payload by typing -p, and the payload is going to be Windows Meterpreter HTTPS or reverse HTTPS. And then we are going to specify the lhost, which is the IP address that we want to receive the connection on. And in this case, we are going to type the VPS IP address, and then the L port that we want to receive the connection on. And I'm gonna say it's going to be 6666, for example, and then the file format exe, and we want to save it and call it HTTPS, for example. And as you can see, the file has been generated on our desktop. Now the next step is to run MSF console and set a listener to listen for the incoming connections. So I'm gonna type MSF console to launch Metasploit. And now I'm gonna type use exploit multi-handler. And then I'm gonna set the payload that we have created, which is gonna be Windows Meterpreter reverse HTTPS. And then I'm gonna say options, and you can see these are the options that we have to set. And we have to set the lhost and the L port. The lhost is going to be the IP address of Kali, so we can use the local IP address, which is 127.0.0.1. And the L port is going to be the port that we want to listen on. And now I'm going to run and listen for the incoming connections. Now the next step is to use SSH tunneling remote port forwarding. And to do so, we are going to type SSH, then -r, which is remote port forwarding. And then we are going to type the port that we are listening on our Kali machine, which is gonna be 33, or not 33, it was 6666. And then the local IP address of Kali Linux, which is 127.0.0.1. And then the port that we are going to receive a connection on our VPS server, which is gonna be 6666. And lastly, I'm gonna add the username, root, and then the IP address of the machine. So what's going to happen here is that the moment we receive a connection on our VPS server on port 6666, it's going to be forwarded to our Kali Linux on port 6666. So now I'm gonna log in, hit enter, and now everything is ready. The next step, or the last step, is to upload this payload to a website and get the URL and download it and execute it on the victim machine. So let me do this. And now it's been downloaded. I'm going to copy it and put it on my desktop. And then I'm gonna change the extension, because I have changed the extension only to upload it to the website, because it doesn't accept exe extensions, and that's why. So the last step is to look whether we are going to receive a connection. So I'm going to open, or let me see, the L port is incorrect, so it has to be 6666. So let me change it here. Set L port. Alright, because we said here in the comment that we want to receive the connection on 6666, and we said that the payload, once we execute the payload, it's going to be forwarded to our VPS server, and through SSH connection, it's going to be forwarded to this port number. So I'm going to launch the payload. And as you can see, we have received a connection, and it's still establishing. So as you can see, we have received the connection when we type sysinfo, for example. As you can see, these are the system information. Now keep in mind that this is not encoded payload, so it could be detected by antiviruses, and I have disabled the firewall and antivirus on my Windows machine, just to show you a demonstration on how we can use SSH tunneling to get a reverse connection to our Kali Linux. Now, if you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel, and follow us on social media for more content. Thank you for watching.